My dear friends, I stand before you today to speak about something that touches the hearts of many. Something that, if we're honest, may stir a deep emotion in the soul of a woman. The subject is one that many of us have faced at one time or another. It's the quiet of an empty house, the loneliness that wraps around your heart, and the unease that lingers in the silence. Recognizing the feelings of loneliness and fear that many women experience when alone at home is something that cannot be overlooked. It's something that cuts deep into the heart, because we live in a world that at times can be unpredictable, unsettling, and even dangerous. Women particularly may face a sense of vulnerability when they are by themselves. It is a natural response to feel unsettled in an empty house, where the silence can amplify thoughts and fears that might otherwise go unnoticed. The stillness of an empty home often brings with it a weight that is hard to describe. It's in those quiet moments when you hear the faint creak of a floorboard or the rustle of the wind outside that your mind begins to race. What if someone is out there? What if something happens? The absence of the familiar voices, the comforting presence of family or friends, leaves a feeling of uncertainty in its wake. It's the kind of loneliness that isn't just about physical absence, but is often accompanied by a deeper fear. The fear of being unprotected, of facing the unknown with no one there to help. We cannot ignore the reality of how many women feel when they are alone at night, even in their own homes. Whether it's after a long day, a moment of exhaustion, or just the quiet lull of the night setting in, it's easy for fear to creep in and overshadow the peace of solitude. It's the fear of being unprotected in a world where bad things sometimes happen to good people. And in these moments, the mind can easily begin to entertain dark thoughts and worst-case scenarios. You wonder about the things that could go wrong and imagine threats that seem far more real than they should. I think of how at times a woman might lay awake, listening intently, hoping to hear the reassuring sounds of a family member returning home or the familiar hum of a TV in the next room. When that reassurance is absent, fear can easily take root. It's not always about the tangible threats that exist in the world. Sometimes it's the intangible, the anxiety, the worry, the isolation. That is the most difficult to overcome. The darkness outside can mirror the fear within, and the feeling of being alone can seem like an enemy that only grows stronger in the silence. But it's important to understand that these feelings, these fears and insecurities are real. It's okay to acknowledge them. It's okay to feel vulnerable at times. Women, like all people, have moments of weakness, moments when the world seems too heavy, too uncertain. It's okay to feel afraid, to feel small, and to wonder how to make it through those long, lonely nights. This vulnerability is a part of the human experience, a reflection of the battles we face, both seen and unseen. And yet, in those moments of isolation and fear, we are invited to lean into something greater than ourselves. In the stillness and the silence, God is present, and He sees us in our moments of vulnerability. It is precisely in these times of fear and loneliness that His comforting presence can offer peace beyond understanding. We are not meant to face this world alone, and it's in recognizing these fears that we also begin to recognize the need for God's presence in our lives, especially in our moments of weakness and solitude. God's promise of protection is one of the most comforting truths we can hold on to, especially in times when we feel vulnerable, isolated, or afraid. When you are alone at home, the silence often brings more than just quiet. It brings uncertainty. The world can seem full of dangers, both real and imagined, but God's Word speaks clearly to our hearts about His never-ending protection over us. He doesn't leave us to fend for ourselves in moments of fear or doubt. In fact, the Bible promises us again and again that God is our protector, a refuge, and a fortress in times of trouble. When I think of God's promise to protect us, I'm reminded of the comforting words in Psalm 91, where the psalmist declares, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust." These words are not just comforting, they are a declaration of God's faithfulness. He is a refuge, a place of safety, a shelter from all harm. This promise holds true no matter where we are, whether in a crowded room or alone at home. The truth is, God's protection is not bound by our circumstances or our location. No matter where you find yourself, God is your protector. I've often found great comfort in these words, especially in moments of anxiety and fear. It's easy to feel unprotected when the house is quiet, when you're lying alone in your bed, hearing every sound that might signal danger. But that's when God's promise becomes real. He doesn't leave you to face the night alone. No matter how alone you may feel, He is there. God's presence is a constant. His protection surrounds you like a shield. In Isaiah 43:2, God makes a beautiful promise to His people. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." These words remind us that no matter what we face, God is with us in every circumstance. When fear comes, when danger threatens, God's presence is a reminder that nothing can overwhelm us. The floods may rise, the fire may burn, but His protection will keep us safe. It's important to remember that this protection is not always about preventing every bad thing from happening. We live in a broken world, and there are times when we may face challenges, struggles, or even harm. But God's promise is not that we will never face difficulty. His promise is that He will be with us through it all. In the storms of life, He is our anchor, our stability, and our protector. When you feel vulnerable, when you feel alone, remember that God is right there with you, offering you His peace and His protection. Consider the story of the Apostle Paul. There were many times in his life when he faced danger, beatings, shipwrecks, imprisonment, and threats against his life. And yet, in the midst of all these trials, Paul had an unshakable confidence that God was with him, protecting him. In Timothy 4:17, Paul writes, "But the Lord stood by me and gave me strength." Despite everything he went through, he was never truly alone. God was always there, standing by him, giving him strength in his moments of need. This is the same promise that God offers us. He is with us, standing by us, giving us the strength to face whatever comes our way. I also think about the story of David, who faced many dangers in his life, whether it was when he fought Goliath or when he was pursued by King Saul. But David constantly acknowledged God as his protector. In Psalm 23, he writes, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." David found peace in the knowledge that no matter what threat came his way, God was there to protect him. And that same God is with you, my friend, guarding you and keeping you safe. God's protection is not just about shielding us from physical harm, it's about guarding our hearts, minds, and spirits as well. Fear can be a powerful force. It can paralyze us, cause us to doubt, and keep us from living in the fullness of God's promises. But when we remember that God is our protector, we can stand firm in His peace. Fear cannot thrive where the presence of God dwells. When you know that God is your refuge, your protector, your fortress, the fear that once seemed overwhelming begins to lose its power. The fear may not disappear immediately, but in the presence of God you will find strength, courage, and peace. When you are alone at home, whether it's the middle of the night or just a quiet moment in your day, remind yourself of God's promises. Speak His word over your life and know that He is with you. The Lord, the Creator of heaven and earth, is your protector. He stands beside you, guarding you from all harm, offering you a peace that no fear can ever take away. The power of faith over fear is one of the most transformative truths we can embrace, especially in moments when fear seems overwhelming. Fear, my friends, is a very real force. It comes to us in many forms: fear of the unknown, fear of danger, fear of failure, fear of being alone. And these fears can often feel paralyzing, especially when we are faced with the quiet isolation of being alone at home. But what I want you to understand is that faith is stronger than fear. It doesn't matter how big or how loud the fear may seem. When you stand firm in faith, fear has to give way. There's something powerful about choosing faith, even in the midst of fear. When we choose to believe in God's promises, when we choose to trust in His protection, when we choose to surrender our anxieties to Him, we begin to experience a peace that transcends our circumstances. Faith allows us to stand tall when everything inside of us is trembling. It enables us to walk through the storm with the assurance that God is with us every step of the way. You see, fear tells us what could go wrong, what might happen, and all the worst-case scenarios that could unfold. It paints a picture of hopelessness, of weakness, and of defeat. But faith, my friends, doesn't look at the storm. Faith looks at the one who calms the storm. When we are afraid, we are given a choice. We can either focus on the fear, or we can focus on our faith. And when we make the choice to focus on faith, fear loses its grip on our hearts. Let me share with you a beautiful truth. God is bigger than any fear you face. Whether you are facing the fear of being alone at night, the fear of an uncertain future, or the fear of something unknown, God is greater than all of it. His power and presence are greater than any threat that would seek to shake your peace. The Bible tells us in 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. This is the love of God, a love that casts out every ounce of fear, a love that is steadfast and unwavering. When we stand firm in God's love, fear cannot have dominion over us. I know many of us are familiar with the story of Peter walking on the water. Peter's faith was strong when he stepped out of the boat in the middle of a storm to walk toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind and the waves, when his attention shifted from Jesus to the fear of the storm around him, he began to sink. Jesus immediately reached out to him and said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Matthew 14:31. It wasn't the storm that was the problem. It was the doubt, the fear that caused Peter to lose focus on Jesus. As long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he was able to walk on the water. But the moment he took his eyes off of Jesus and focused on the fear of the waves, he began to sink. This is a powerful lesson for us, my friends. When we are faced with fear, whether it's the fear of being alone or the fear of what might happen in the future, we must keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. The waves of fear will always be there, but we don't have to be consumed by them. We don't have to sink under their weight. Instead, we can stand firm in faith, knowing that God's love and power are greater than the storm. In those moments when fear begins to rise, replace that fear with faith. Speak faith over your fears. Remind yourself of God's promises. Say to yourself, God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. Speak His word over your life. Declare, the Lord is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Psalm 91:2. As you declare these truths, you are actively choosing faith over fear. And fear will begin to lose its power. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to trust God in spite of the fear. Faith acknowledges the fear, but it refuses to be ruled by it. It looks at the uncertainty, the threat, the danger, and says, my God is bigger. My God is stronger. My God will protect me. And when we choose that kind of faith, we find peace in the midst of the storm. We find courage when we feel weak. We find strength when we are afraid. I remember a time in my own life when I was facing a particularly difficult season. I felt overwhelmed by the challenges before me, and fear was trying to creep in, telling me that I wouldn't make it through. But in that moment, I chose to lean into my faith. I chose to declare God's promises over my life. I remember saying, God, you are my refuge, you are my strength, you are my protector, and I will not be afraid. As I spoke those words, something shifted within me. The fear that had once seemed so powerful began to fade, and in its place, I felt the peace of God filling my heart. This is the power of faith. It doesn't eliminate fear, but it overcomes it. It doesn't promise that we won't face difficult moments, but it assures us that God is with us and we are never alone. Faith in God is a shield that guards us from the attacks of fear. It enables us to face the unknown with courage, knowing that God is holding us in His hand. So, my dear friends, when fear comes knocking, whether it's the fear of being alone, the fear of danger, or any other kind of fear, choose faith over fear. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Declare His promises over your life, and remember that His perfect love will cast out every fear. You are not alone. God is with you, and His power will always be greater than any fear that tries to steal your peace. Woman's strength in God's presence is a truth that we must hold dear, especially when facing moments of fear, loneliness, or uncertainty. Too often, society tries to define strength in ways that are limited and surface level. Strength is not merely about physical power or independence. True strength, lasting strength, is found in the depth of our relationship with God. It is a strength that rises from within, fueled by His presence and His promises. I want you to understand this, my dear sisters. There is a mighty strength within you that is not your own. It is a strength that comes from God, a strength that is made perfect in your weakness. When the night feels long and you are alone, when fear threatens to steal your peace, remember that the very presence of God within you is a source of strength that the world cannot take away. This is the kind of strength that David knew, the kind of strength that empowers a woman to face every fear and every challenge with courage, knowing that God is with her. Take a moment and think about the women in the Bible who displayed extraordinary strength in the face of adversity. Consider Deborah, the judge and prophetess, who led the people of Israel with wisdom and courage in a time when leadership was primarily a male-dominated role. Deborah's strength did not come from her own abilities, but from her deep trust in God. She had the courage to rise up and lead, knowing that God would give her the strength to fulfill His calling. And God did just that. When others might have been paralyzed by fear or doubt, Deborah trusted in God's plan, and He used her mightily. And then there's Esther, a woman who was faced with the life-threatening task of saving her people from destruction. Esther's strength didn't come from her position as a queen or her beauty, but from her faith in God and her willingness to step into the unknown, risking her life for the sake of others. She faced a moment of fear where the stakes were high and the outcome uncertain. Yet she responded with courage, declaring, "If I perish," because she knew that God had called her for such a time as this. God gave her the strength to step forward in faith, and He provided the victory in the end. These women, Deborah, Esther, Sarah, and so many others, serve as powerful reminders that true strength comes from knowing that God is with us. It's the strength that comes from walking in His presence, trusting in His promises, and leaning on His power rather than relying on our own limited abilities. We are stronger when we acknowledge that we are not alone. When we face life's challenges, when we face those moments of fear or loneliness, we can draw from God's presence, knowing that we are never left to face it on our own. I've seen many women rise to face difficult situations, and the one thing they have in common is their reliance on God's strength. I think of the single mother who faces the daunting task of raising her children alone. She may feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and uncertain, but it's in her faith that she finds her strength. She knows that she's not doing it in her own power. She is doing it with God's help. His strength becomes her strength, and His peace becomes her peace. When she feels weak, she can stand on the truth of Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that strength enables her to press forward with faith and perseverance, even when the road seems long and the burden seem heavy. And I think of the woman who faces illness or hardship, whose body may be weary, but whose spirit remains strong in the Lord. It's in those moments when her own strength seems to fail that she leans into God's presence like never before. She discovers that God's strength is sufficient in her weakness. She finds courage in the truth that God is with her, even in the darkest of times. She doesn't have to be strong on her own. God's strength upholds her. This is the incredible truth. God has placed within each of us, as women, an inner strength that is not of our own making. It is His presence in our lives, His power at work within us, that gives us the ability to stand firm, to be resilient, and to rise above the challenges we face. The enemy would have us believe that we are weak, that we are powerless, that we cannot make it through the night. But God's Word declares something entirely different. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul writes, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." It is in our weakness, in our moments of feeling alone or afraid, that God's power is most evident. I also think of the strength that God gives to women who stand firm in faith, even when others doubt or question their decisions. There's strength in saying yes to God's calling, even when it seems difficult or the road ahead looks unclear. There's strength in standing firm in your convictions, in refusing to bow to fear or pressure. There's strength in knowing that your worth is not defined by what the world says about you, but by what God says about you. And God says that you are His daughter, chosen, loved, and empowered by His Spirit. My friends, God has given you incredible strength, strength that is made perfect in His presence. You are not weak, you are strong because the Almighty God, the Creator of the universe, is with you. When you feel vulnerable, remember that His presence is your strength. When you feel afraid, draw from the well of His power. He has equipped you with everything you need to face this world, with courage and confidence. No matter the situation, no matter the challenge, you are stronger than you know, because God's strength is made perfect in you. When we step into the presence of God, it is a transformative experience, one that touches the very core of who we are, reshaping our hearts, minds, and lives. There is nothing like the power of God's presence to change the atmosphere, to calm our fears, and to give us a deep, unshakable peace. When we are alone at home, when the silence feels overwhelming or the darkness feels consuming, the truth is that God is present, even when we cannot see or feel Him. And it is in His presence that we find the strength to face whatever challenges lie ahead. Think about the times in your life when you have felt His presence so clearly. It might have been in the quiet moments of prayer when you were pouring out your heart before God and suddenly felt the weight of His love and peace surround you. Or perhaps it was in a moment of worship when the music and the words seemed to lift your spirit to a higher place, and you knew without a shadow of a doubt that you were standing in the presence of the Almighty. There's a power that comes from being in God's presence that surpasses any fear, any anxiety, any loneliness. In Psalm 16:11, David writes, "You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. The presence of God is not just about feeling a warm, comforting sensation. It's about being filled with the joy and peace that only He can provide. When you step into God's presence, you are stepping into a place where joy is not fleeting, it is everlasting. It is a joy that doesn't depend on your circumstances, but on the truth that God is with you and that He holds you in His hands. And that presence, my friends, is available to us at all times. We don't have to wait for the perfect moment or for a big event or a powerful service to experience God's presence. We don't have to wait for the right conditions. The beauty of God's presence is that it is always near. The Bible tells us in James 4:8, "Come near to God and He will come near to you." God is always ready, always willing to meet with us. It is a matter of choosing to open our hearts, choosing to quiet our minds, and choosing to make room for Him in our lives. When a woman is alone in her home, when the house is quiet and the world seems far away, she can find peace by drawing near to God. In the stillness, in the moments of solitude, she can experience the presence of the Creator of the universe, who knows her name, who knows her deepest thoughts, who cares about her fears and her hopes. God is present even in the quiet moments when you feel most alone. In those moments, He offers His peace, His strength, and His presence in a way that changes everything. I think of the times in my life when I've been alone in the stillness, and it was in those moments that I learned to truly seek God's presence. There's something about the quiet that allows us to hear Him more clearly, to sense His peace more deeply. It's in those moments that we often feel His love in the most profound ways. When we are alone, when we are facing the unknown, we can turn to God and know that His presence will never leave us. He is as near as the air we breathe, as close as the next prayer we speak. There is a depth of peace and comfort that only comes from being in the presence of God. It's a peace that transcends understanding, a peace that guards our hearts and minds against the storms of life. It's a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, but rests on the truth of God's unchanging love and faithfulness. In the presence of God, fear begins to lose its grip. Anxiety begins to fade. And in its place, there is a calmness that fills our hearts, knowing that we are not alone, that we are surrounded by the love and protection of a faithful God. God's presence is also a reminder that we are never forgotten. In those moments when loneliness threatens to overwhelm us, when we feel as though we've been left behind or overlooked, we can rest assured that God sees us. He knows our deepest thoughts and our greatest fears. He is intimately acquainted with all of our ways, and He is always with us. There is no place we can go where God's presence cannot reach us. There is no moment in our lives where He is not present, standing beside us, ready to offer His help, His comfort, and His peace. When you are alone at home, when the house feels quiet and the night feels long, remember that you are never truly alone. God's presence is with you, and He offers His peace to you in abundance. Reach out to Him even in the smallest moments. Speak to Him in the silence, knowing that He is listening. Let His presence fill your heart with the strength and peace you need. His presence will never leave you. It will always be there to guide you, to comfort you, and to lift you up. The presence of God changes everything. It transforms our fears into faith, our anxiety into peace, and our loneliness into comfort. When we step into God's presence, we are stepping into the fullness of His love and grace. And there, in the quiet of our hearts, we can find everything we need to face the world with courage, knowing that we are never alone. God is with us, and in His presence, we are complete.